One theme that I have found particularly important throughout Honors 112 has been the role of women in society and subsequent gender inequality. In many of the books that we have read, women are often oppressed and considered ruled by men. This idea often stems from prominent religions that impact societies. Because of this notion that women are to be ruled by men, they are often seen as purely objects to be dominated and have little value other than their sexuality. The Bible is one of the books that shows the clearest view of gender inequality when it comes to the roles of men and women. Men are clearly defined as the head of the household, and women are to be ruled by the men. The Bible does state that men and women are equal in their authorities over each other's bodies in marriage, in the passage, "For the wife does not have authority over her own body, but the husband does. Likewise, the husband does not have authority over his own body, the wife does." 1 Corinthians 7:4. This idea, though, is easily taken over by the many instances that state that women should be subordinate and in a lower ranking position than man. For instance, Paul talks about head covering in one part of 1 Corinthians and says, "For a man ought to not have his head veiled, since he is the image and reflection of God. But woman is a reflection of man. Indeed, man was not made from woman, but woman from man." Corinthians 11:7-9. This is a clear view that women are not equal to man because they are made from man. Though the Bible says this, it also says in Genesis that God created humankind in his image. In the image of God he created them. Male and female he created them. Genesis 1:27. This quote emphasizes that God did not just create man, but he also created woman. Though women may have been created from man, they are both in God's image. Another instance that is particularly sexist is when Paul discusses the roles of women in church. He believes that women, in quotes, should be silent in the churches, for they are not permitted to speak but should be subordinate, as the law also says. If there is anything they desire to know, let them ask their husbands at home, for it is shameful for a woman to speak in church. 1 Corinthians 14:34-35. I believe this notion comes from Genesis because God says to Eve when she eats from the forbidden tree that he, or man, shall rule over you. Genesis 3:16. Not only were women often ruled by men in societies, but they were also seen as objects of material value. In The Golden Ass by Apuleius, the main character Lucius goes into great detail in describing the servant girl Fotis by only judging her physical appearance. He also talks a great deal about her hair in a very desirous manner. Lucius does not view Fotis as a human being that has characteristics such as opinions, ideas, and emotions, but basically only on her sex appeal. This clearly demonstrates the mindset that men often had around 150 AD in Greece in viewing women as sexual objects rather than equals. In the mid-1300s, gender discrimination remained prominent throughout literature. In the Canterbury Tales, the Wife of Bath's prologue is a perfect example of how women were considered less than men. The Wife of Bath's prologue explains how she used her own sexuality as the only way that she could control her many husbands. Because women had no rights at this time in history, their only substantial worth was often their virginity. She used this to gain control over her husbands and therefore have some control over her life. The worth of virginity can also be seen in the actual story that she tells when the knight initially commits his crime. Though it is morally upsetting that the young maiden was raped by the knight, the main crime was that he, in quotations, took by main force her maidenhood. Page 241. In doing this, the girl was no longer a virgin and therefore had significantly less value as a bride. Even within just these three books, it is clear that gender inequality is a very prominent theme throughout the literature that we have read. This idea is important to discuss in our Honors 112 class because it is still relevant in society today. Although men and women are far more equal now than they have been in the past, there is still inequality in many aspects of life. By reading these texts, we can see why these inequalities arise, especially from religion, and the impacts that it has. We can also use this knowledge to change societal norms for the better.